There is one book in the Bible where God is never mentioned. Not once. Not a name, not a title, not a prayer. Search it line by line. No Lord, no Almighty, no miracle, no commandment. Nobody prays, nobody worships. The temple is never named. And yet it sits inside the Hebrew Bible. And once a year an entire people still reads it out loud, start to finish. For centuries, rabbis argued about whether it belonged in the canon at all. Some of the earliest Christian lists of the Old Testament quietly leave it out. Martin Luther said he wished it had never come down to us. And it is the only book of the Old Testament never found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. A book about survival that almost did not survive. And here's the part that should stop you. It is not a book about God's absence. It is one of the most tightly controlled stories in all of Scripture. Nothing in it is random. Its name is Esther. The silence is not an accident. The silence is the point. Because this book does something no other book dares to do. It removes God from the page. And then it shows you a rescue so precisely engineered that you cannot explain it any other way. Here is my promise. By the end, you will see what Esther is actually teaching. Not that God is missing, that God is hiding, and that hiddenness is a kind of nearness you have probably never considered. Which is exactly why this book was written for people like you. So let me set the scene. The year is around 483 before Christ. The place is Persia. The king's name in Hebrew is Ahasuerus. In Greek, that name comes down to us as Xerxes, son of Darius, grandson of Cyrus, ruler of the largest empire the world has seen. The book tells you its size in the first sentence. 127 provinces from India to Kush. Every road leads back to his throne. And this year, he throws a party. Not a party. A campaign of parties. A display of wealth that runs 180 days. 6 months of showing his nobles the treasure of the empire. 6 months of proving that he can afford anything that exists. And when that finally ends, he throws one more. 7 days in the garden court of the palace for everyone in the citadel of Susa. White cotton and blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen and purple. Marble pillars. Couches of gold and silver. A pavement of porphyry and marble. Wine in vessels, no two of them alike, poured without limit by royal order. Notice what the writer is doing. He is not admiring it. He is counting it. He wants you to feel a world that measures everything and worships nothing. On the 7th day, the king's heart is merry with wine, and he gives an order. Bring Queen Vashti, wearing the royal crown. He wants to show the peoples and the princes her beauty. She is not being invited. She is being exhibited. One more object in the inventory. And Vashti says no. The book gives her no speech, no motive, just the refusal and the silence after it. The most powerful man on earth, drunk in front of his entire court, and a woman will not come when he calls. The king's anger burns within him. So he does what this empire always does with a problem. He turns it into a law. And his advisors panic. If word of this gets out, they say, every wife in the empire will look at her husband with contempt. So they write an irrevocable decree. Vashti is banished from the king's presence forever, and her position is given to another. It goes out in every language, that every man be master in his own house. The empire's postal system, announcing that the king cannot control his own dinner party. Hold on to that detail. It matters later. In Persia, once a decree is written and sealed, not even the king can take it back. Time passes. The king goes to war with Greece and comes home beaten, and his servants suggest a comfort. Let beautiful young women be gathered for the king. Sunday school turns this into a beauty pageant. It was not a pageant. Officers were sent into every province to collect women. The text says they were taken. There is no application. There is no consent. There is a royal harem and a king who has just been publicly humiliated. Each young woman is given 12 months of preparation before her one night. 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with spices and ointments, a year of being made into something for a single evening. Afterward, she goes to the house of the concubines and does not return unless the king remembers her name. The Bible does not romanticize this. It reports it flatly and lets the horror sit there. And into that machine walks a girl from a Jewish family in exile. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah, which means myrtle. Her Persian name is Esther. She is an orphan. Her father and her mother died, and the text explains nothing further. She was raised by an older cousin named Mordecai of the tribe of Benjamin, whose family had been carried into exile from Jerusalem. He took her as his own daughter. That single line is the only tenderness in the whole chapter. And then Esther is taken to the palace. She is placed under the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women, and the text says something it will keep saying about her. She found favor. Haggai favors her. He gives her the best place in the house, 7 chosen attendants, and everything she needs. Watch that word, favor. It comes back again and again, and nobody in this story ever explains where it comes from. Before she goes in, Mordecai tells her one thing: do not reveal your people. So she walks into the most public room in the empire carrying a secret. And the king loves Esther more than all the women. He sets the royal crown on her head and makes her queen instead of Vashti. A Jewish exile is now the queen of Persia, and not one person in that palace knows it. Now the story stops and tells you what looks like a footnote. Mordecai is sitting at the king's gate. That is not loitering. It means he holds some official post, and he overhears 2 of the king's doorkeepers, Bigthan and Teresh, plotting to assassinate the king. He tells Esther. Esther tells the king in Mordecai's name. The plot is investigated. The 2 men are executed. And then this. It was recorded in the book of the Chronicles. That is all. Mordecai saves the king's life and receives nothing, not even a thank you. A good deed, written down in a book nobody reads, and forgotten. Remember that sentence. Years from now, it will save an entire nation. Because now a man walks onto the stage, and the temperature drops. Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. The king promotes him above every other official, and the command goes out that everyone at the king's gate must bow down and pay him homage. Everyone does, except one man. Mordecai will not bow. The text never says why, and people have argued about it for 2,000 years. But there is a clue buried in the names. Mordecai is a Benjaminite, descended from a man named Kish. King Saul was the son of Kish, and Haman is called the Agagite. Agag was the king of the Amalekites, the man Saul was commanded to destroy and did not. So this is not a workplace dispute. This is an ancient feud walking back onto the field 500 years later. The Amalekites attacked Israel from behind in the wilderness, picking off the weak and the stragglers. And here their heir stands in the court of Persia. Day after day, the officials ask why Mordecai defies the king. Finally, he tells them he is a Jew. They report it to Haman. And Haman looks. The text says he was filled with fury. Then it says something worse. He thought it beneath him to lay hands on Mordecai alone. One man would not be enough. He decides to destroy every Jew in the empire, from India to Kush, young and old, women and children, in a single day. And here is how a genocide begins in this book. Not with an army, with dice. They cast pur, the text says, that is, they cast lots before Haman. Pur is a Persian word for a lot. a small marked cube thrown to let the gods pick a day. Archaeologists have actually dug one up. So Haman throws it, month by month, day by day, until the lot chooses a date. And this is the first strange thing in a very strange book. It is the first month, Nisan, and the lot lands on the 12th month, Adar. The dice have just given the Jews 11 months to live. Haman is delighted. He has a date. He does not notice what he has done. He has handed his enemies almost a full year to save themselves. The book never says God tipped the dice. It simply tells you where they landed and lets you sit with it. Haman goes to the king. And listen, because he never says the word Jew. There is a certain people, he says, scattered and dispersed among your provinces. Their laws are different from every other people. They do not keep the king's laws. It is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. Every word of it is the oldest slander in the world. They are everywhere. They are different. They cannot be trusted. Then he offers money. 10,000 talents of silver, roughly 340 tons. Scholars estimate it at an enormous share of the empire's annual income. He will bankrupt himself to kill one man's people. And the king does not even ask who they are. He takes off his signet ring and hands it over. Keep the money, he says. Do with the people as it seems good to you. An extermination approved without asking the victim's name. The scribes are summoned on the 13th day of the first month. The decree is written in every language and sealed with the king's ring. Couriers ride out to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, and to plunder their goods. And then comes one of the most chilling sentences in the Bible. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. 2 men toast a death warrant while the city outside does not understand what happened. That is what evil looks like from the top. Paperwork and a glass of wine. When Mordecai learns of it, he tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth and ashes, and goes into the middle of the city with a loud and bitter cry. He comes to the king's gate, but he cannot enter it. No one in sackcloth may pass through. The empire will not even let grief through the door. And in every province the decree reaches, there is great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting. Deep inside the palace, Esther knows nothing. She hears only that her cousin is standing outside in rags. She sends him clothes. He refuses them. That refusal turns the story. She sends a servant to ask what is wrong, and Mordecai sends back a copy of the decree itself. Show it to her, he says. Explain it to her, and command her to go to the king and plead for her people. And Esther sends back the most human sentence in the book. Everyone knows the law. Anyone who enters the inner court unsummoned is put to death. There is one exception. If the king holds out his golden scepter, they live. And then this. I have not been called to the king these 30 days. Read that again. She is the queen, and she has not been summoned in a month. She does not have power. She has proximity to power, which is a much thinner thing. And she knows exactly what happened to the last queen who displeased this king. And Mordecai sends back the words this book is remembered for. Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? That sentence is doing 3 things at once. First, it is a warning. Your palace is not a hiding place. There is no version of this where you survive alone. Second, it is the closest this book ever comes to naming God. Deliverance will rise from another place. Mordecai is certain. Rescue is coming. He is simply not certain it comes through her. He believes in a promise so completely that he does not even need to say who made it. And third, it is a question, not a claim. Who knows? Not, God told me. Not, I have had a vision. Just look at where you are standing. That is what faith looks like when God is silent. Not certainty. A holy suspicion that you are standing exactly where you were placed. And Esther answers, "Go, gather all the Jews in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Notice what she calls for. A fast, not a prayer. The book will not let the word out, but there is only one direction a fasting people is facing. The girl who was told to hide who she was has just decided to stop hiding. On the 3rd day, Esther puts on her royal robes and stands in the inner court. The king is on his throne. She is standing where the law says she should die. And the golden scepter goes out toward her. "What is your request, Queen Esther? It shall be given you, even to the half of my kingdom." And she asks for a dinner party. She invites the king, and she invites Haman. That is all. That is the whole request. At the banquet, the king asks again, and again she defers. "Come tomorrow." People call this hesitation. It is not. It is a trap being built one hinge at a time. Haman walks out of that banquet glowing. 2 nights alone with the king and queen. He is the only man in the empire invited. And then he passes the king's gate, and Mordecai does not rise, does not tremble, does not move. Haman goes home filled with rage and calls his friends and his wife Zeresh together to boast. His wealth, his sons, his promotion, the queen's private invitation. And then he says, "Yet all this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." That is the anatomy of hatred. He has everything, and one man's spine ruins all of it. So his wife and his friends give him an idea. Build a gallows 50 cubits high, about 75 feet, higher than the palace wall. It is not an execution. It is a billboard. And the Hebrew word is simply a pole, a piece of wood. The Persians impaled. The image is uglier than gallows suggests. He has it built that night. In the morning he will ask the king's permission. He goes to bed pleased. And this is where the book quietly detonates. On that night, the king could not sleep. That is the sentence. That is the hinge of the entire story. 10 words about a man with insomnia. No angel, no dream, no voice from heaven. A king lies awake in the dark, annoyed. And he asks for something to be read to him, not poetry, not music. He asks for the book of memorable deeds, the royal chronicles. "Read me the minutes, put me to sleep." And the servant unrolls the scroll and begins to read somewhere. And out of 5 years of imperial record-keeping, he reads the page about Bigthan and Teresh, and a man named Mordecai, who once reported a plot and saved the king's life. "What honor has been given to Mordecai for this?" the king asks. And the servants answer, "Nothing has been done for him." And at that exact moment, footsteps in the outer court. Someone is here, very early, uninvited. "Who is in the court?" the king asks. Now Haman had just entered to ask permission to hang Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared for him. He is standing in the hallway with a death warrant in his mouth. And the king speaks first. What should be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman says to himself, "Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?" So he builds his own dream out loud. Royal robes the king has worn, the horse the king has ridden, a royal crown on its head. Let a noble prince lead him through the city square, proclaiming before him, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." And the king says, "Hurry, take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do all this for Mordecai the Jew. Leave out nothing you have mentioned." And so, on the morning he meant to build a grave, Haman leads his enemy through Susa on the king's own horse, shouting his praises to the crowd. Then he hurries home, his head covered, mourning. And his wife, who invented the gallows 2 nights ago, looks at him and says something extraordinary. If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him. You will surely fall before him. Even Haman's wife can see it. Something is running underneath this story, and it is not on their side. While she is still speaking, the king's eunuchs arrive to hurry him to the second banquet. And there, over wine, the king asks his question a 3rd time, and she stops hiding. If I have found favor in your sight, O king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. She reads Haman's own decree back across the table. Who is he, and where is he, the king demands, who has dared to do this? And Esther says, a foe and an enemy, this wicked Haman. And Haman is terrified before the king and the queen. The king rises in his wrath and goes out into the palace garden. He is beginning to understand what he signed. Haman stays behind to beg Esther for his life. He falls on the couch where she is reclining, and the king walks back in. Will he even assault the queen in my own house? The words leave the king's mouth, and the servants cover Haman's face. In Persia, a covered face means a dead man. Then a servant named Harbona speaks, and history turns on a footman's remark. There is the gallows Haman built for Mordecai, he says. It is standing at Haman's own house. And the king says, hang him on that. The book will not show you the body, only a silhouette against a bright morning, and the wrath of the king abated. Every trap in this story closes on the man who said it. That is not a coincidence. That is the design. But the story is not over, and this is the part people forget. Haman is dead. The decree is not. Persian law cannot be revoked. Evil signed, and evil does not unsign. Killing the man does not cancel the machine. So Esther falls at the king's feet, weeping, and pleads again. And a second decree is written, not a cancellation, a counterweight. The Jews of every city are granted the right to gather and defend their lives. Couriers ride out again on the swift royal horses, faster than the death sentence went. And Mordecai, the man who would not bow, walks out of the palace in royal blue and white with a great golden crown, and the city of Susa shouts and rejoices. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. 4 words for a people who had spent 11 months counting down. And then comes the 13th of Adar, the day the dice chose. Their enemies had hoped to gain mastery over them, but it was turned to the contrary. Turned to the contrary. That phrase is the theme sentence of the entire book. Everything flips. The Jews defend themselves. The book records the numbers plainly and does not soften them. It is a brutal chapter, and it should sit uncomfortably. This is a story about a people who were given a single day in which to not be exterminated. And 3 times the text notes something you might miss. They laid no hand on the plunder. Haman's decree had promised plunder. The Jews take none. When it is over, they rest, and they eat, and they send portions of food to one another, and gifts to the poor. And Mordecai writes it all down, and makes it law forever. They kept the 14th day of Adar, and also the 15th, as days of feasting and gladness. And they called those days Purim. Purim, the plural of pur, the plural of the lot, the plural of a rolled die. The Jews named their festival of deliverance after the enemy's dice, not after Esther, not after Mordecai, not after a battle or a miracle or a mountain. They named it after the random throw that was supposed to kill them, and did not. Because the lot is cast into the lap, says the book of Proverbs, but its every decision is from the Lord. So let me go back to where we started. God is never named in Esther. When the book was translated into Greek, later editors could not stand it. They added 6 long passages, 107 verses, and put God back in. A prayer for Mordecai. A prayer for Esther. A dream for the king. In Greek, the word God appears about 50 times, and you can feel exactly what those editors felt. The Hebrew silence is unbearable, but they misunderstood the book they were fixing. The silence was never a hole. The silence was the architecture. Because look at the chain of accidents you have just watched. A queen refuses a drunk king at exactly the wrong moment, and a throne opens. Of all the women taken from all the provinces of the empire, the king happens to love the Jewish one. A man happens to overhear an assassination plot, happens to report it, and happens to be forgotten. A die is thrown, and out of 354 possible days, it lands 11 months away. A king happens to be unable to sleep on the one night that matters, and happens to call for the one book containing the one forgotten page. And the servant happens to unroll it at that page. At the exact hour the man building the gallows walks into the courtyard. Any one of these is a coincidence. 2 is luck. But this is the whole book, stacked, load-bearing, every accident carrying the next one. That is the argument Esther makes, and it makes it by saying nothing. The author just lays the coincidences down, one by one, until the pile becomes an accusation. Because, if he had written the name, you would have relaxed. You would have filed it away with the burning bush in the parted sea. Miracles are easy to believe in and impossible to live in. Nobody's sea parts. Esther is written for everyone whose life has no pillar of fire in it. For people in exile. In the wrong empire, under the wrong king, working the wrong job, hiding the wrong name. For people who have prayed and heard nothing back and gone to work anyway. That is the world Esther is set in. And it is the world most of us live in. And the book says, that world is not abandoned. It is being written. Hiddenness is not absence. There is a difference between an empty room and a room where someone stands behind you. And there is one more thing, hidden in her name. In Hebrew, the verb to hide is sitar. I will surely hide. My face is Haster Astur. Esther is almost certainly just a Persian name, from the goddess Ishtar, or from the word for star. The rabbis knew that. But they heard the other thing in it anyway, and they were not wrong about the book. The hidden queen in the hidden book, about the hidden God. So what do you do with this? You do what Esther did. Because Mordecai never told her what would happen, he only asked her a question. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Notice he never promises she will survive. She might not, and she says so herself. Providence is not a guarantee of safety. It is a claim that you are not random. You cannot see the pattern while you are standing inside it. Esther could not. They only ever saw one step. A refusal. A rumor. A sleepless night. You only ever get to see providence backwards, which means the thing that looks like a dead end, a delay, a boring page in a ledger nobody reads. That may turn out to be the exact sentence that gets read out loud on the night the king cannot sleep. That is the book of Esther, a story with no God in it, about a God who is in every line of it. No thunder, no fire, no voice. Just a chain of coincidences too long and too precise to be a coincidence at all. And a question, still open, still addressed to you. Who knows?